What's going on, everybody? Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Today I just wanted to talk about the first camera and lens combination that got me into wildlife photography, which is photography, period. And that is this camera here. And this is the little R10. As you may or may not know, this is a crop sensor camera, so meaning that the sensor is smaller than obviously a full frame camera. Now, starting off, I'm going to be jumping around in this video. I don't have a script or anything like that. I've just freestyled it. But in case you didn't know, or you're new to photography, and I'm telling you this from someone who had no idea what I was doing when I started this journey with wildlife photography and people photography, any of that stuff. Crop sensor cameras. A lot of people in the wildlife photography world, they have a thing for them because of that. Either the 1.5 crop that you find in Sony and Nikon and those other brands, or the 1.6 crop that you find on Canon cameras like this one here. That 1.6 crop, if you do a little bit of research on it, allows you to get closer to your subjects, basically, because your subject is being cropped in camera, making it look bigger. When I actually pull out the file, and so everything looks a little bit bigger. So in other words, this is a 100 to 400 millimeter lens. Okay, this is the 100 to 400 millimeter RF 100 to 400 millimeter lens by Canon. And on the R10 or R50, R100, or R7, the maximum zoom on this lens or field of view will be something equal to 640 millimeters. So 640 millimeters of field of view, so zoom, okay? That means that this will get you a pretty close shot to your subject. So this is why a lot of people, especially people that are entering the wildlife photography world, they tend to gravitate. That I have noticed, they tend to gravitate to crop sensor cameras, and they praise them because of that. In fact, when I went to the store to look for a camera and I told them what I wanted to do, they pointed me to the R7. Now, I couldn't afford an R7 back then because I just didn't have the money. They offer this lens here, but I decided to go with the R10. Now, this is what the guys at the photo place, or the camera place, recommended. Okay, a crop sensor camera, and he explained the crop factor and how this combination here would give me that nice zoom and whatever. However, people like that, and just from discussing this with other photographers, amateur photographers online, people at those stores, a lot of them, they're not real wildlife photographers. They may know cameras, but a lot of them that I have seen, they don't really know what they're telling you, what they're doing when they're selling you a camera for wildlife photography. There may be some out there that are real pros, and they know their stuff when they're recommending gear for what you want to do. But more often than not, that I have noticed, for example, this combination here, okay? This is okay if you're just starting off and your IQ or image quality is not priority to you. Like you're not pixel peeping, and that's not a big deal to you. You just want to get out there and take photos, and that's it. Just take photos, enjoy your time being out. And whatnot. But if you ever want to get serious, like you want to improve your image quality, there are some things you can still do with this camera, okay, and take professional like photos better, way better than your cell phone. But you cannot just go to a store, pick up a camera like this and a lens like this and start taking photos and expect to get those results. It doesn't work that way. You have to set the camera up. You have to give it the proper, you have to tell the camera what you're looking to do and set it up properly for you to get those results that you have in your mind or that you see online that you want to get. So for example, the R10 being a crop sensor camera, this camera doesn't do very well in low light situations with this lens, okay? So when you are out, for example, here in Norway, when you're out in the forest where the light is being blocked by the trees and you're in the tree canopy or whatever, this lens is going to skyrocket the ISO. And the reason why that's happening, it has nothing really to do with the ISO. It has to do with your shutter speed and your aperture, that your settings on this camera. So let me just really quick first show you what settings I use on my Canon R10 so that you can understand the photos that I'm about to show you, how I took those photos with this lens. So I'm gonna do this handheld, and I hope that, okay, so first of all, I am using C-RAW, which is cropped RAW for my my photos. That is what I use. I don't shoot JPEG. It's just be a big disservice to myself to do that. These are my settings for my shutter speed, auto ISO. Now, with my ISO speeds, these are my settings, and I have it limited to 6400. Okay, for both, so you can replicate. So if you want to copy those settings, you can. Let's see, what else that I think it's important. I do not use HDR. I do use highlight tone priority, because I do not want my photos in a sunny day or a bright sunny day to be, my highlights to be blown out. So I use highlight tone priority. You don't have to use this if you want to just manually control your exposure. You can do that as well. You don't have to turn this on. My metering mode, that is my metering mode. Okay, now this is just for wildlife, okay? Remember that. This is just my settings again. Let's see, my white balance, I have it set there. I use Adobe RGB. So those are basically the settings there that you see for this page. Drive mode for wildlife. Let me just go back here. I am using this. So it's not the highest burst, but the second to the fastest. And also I am using electronic shutter. I am not using the first curtain or mechanical shutter, because that creates shutter shock. And the first electronic curtain shutter, even though it minimizes that shutter shock, you still can get some shutter shock out of that, from my experience. So I stay away from that. I have my image stabilization, I have it turned on. But these are the settings that I'm using here, and that's it. And then, okay, so the next tab, it'll be this tab here. Okay, I'm using servo, so you have two options: one shot or servo. One shot is just as it is, one shot. So basically, your autofocus will focus on the subject, and you have to keep your camera there. You have to keep your point of your focus point on the subject, and then take your photo. Now servo, on the other hand, basically if you half hold your shutter button, it will create a blue box, and it will just follow your subject's eye. It'll follow it wherever it is going within the frame, and you can take your shot whenever you're ready, and not lose your focus. So that's the cool thing about servo. So if you're doing wildlife photography, you want to use servo. So autofocus area, that is what I'm using right there. Subject tracking, I have that turned on. I have subject to detect animals, eye detection, I have it enabled. Focus, here we go. And this here, this is important. You want to have this, I turn this down to 0 because I want the camera to focus specifically on the primary subject that entered the frame and that I focused on. I don't want it to be shifting and moving away. I want it to remain focused on that primary subject. So I turn this all the way down to 0. This one here, if you're having some issues with pulse setting, or you're losing track of your subject, you can change this. I have my servo tracking. I have that to number 2, and as you can see here, those are the settings that I am using. And those help with the pulse setting. You know, if you're even though this lens doesn't have that problem, but if you're using a different lens or you're having that pulse setting issue where this kind of not really locking onto your subject, you can try these settings here, and that may help. You just got to click on it, and then do that. Just turn it all the way down. This is tracking sensitivity, and for tracking acceleration or deceleration, I have that set to -1. Okay. So these are, just settings that I use on my R10. The rest, I leave that on auto. I don't mess with anything else. I do enable, so when you go to the blue tab here, I do enable the highlight alert, because I want to know if my highlights are being blown out. When you're looking through the viewfinder or through the screen, you'll see a black area where your highlights are blown out. You see it blinking on and off. You know, that's telling you, hey, you got to adjust your exposure. So yeah, that's very helpful. I also turn off, if you're not using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, I turn on airplane mode. I turn this on because I want my camera to save power, my battery to last me longer, and it does work. It actually does work. So it allows for your battery to last a little bit longer. Okay, so that being said, those are my settings for my R10 with the 100 to 400 lens combination. Okay. Now you might be wondering about this foot, or this tripod foot here. This is not included with this lens. This is a third party. I will post a link in the comments or in the video description. I will post a link where you can go and grab this foot, because it comes with the Arca Swiss mount already. See if it'll show you there. As you can tell, so it'll just slide right in there, and you can remove it, of course. Here, and it fits right on the lens. It's made by this company here. Let's see. It's from China. And another cool thing about this foot, this thing here, is that not only can you mount it to a tripod like this with the Arca Swiss setup, you can also mount it onto a regular tripod, because it has screw holes here for regular tripods. So this right here doesn't limit you to just Arca Swiss mounting. You can also use it on a regular tripod that has, So this thing is very cool. I strongly recommend it, and it's about $40 on the internet. I bought it from AliExpress, and it works great. The reason why you want this here is because when you're taking photos and you're doing this, you extend your lens. If your camera is mounted to the tripod here, so if your camera is mounted to the tripod from this angle here, physics, right, being what it is, you still have a little bit of play here. So these little movements, by you just touching the shutter or just having your hand on the camera itself, you may not feel much movement here in this area, but up here, this thing is doing this. And then you go and take a photo, and then you wonder why your photos are coming out blurry. That's probably why. Because even though you're using a tripod, this extension here, just this little bit, just a tiny bit of movement here, can cause those blurry photos. And even though the lens is image stabilized, it can still happen, believe me. I know. So instead of mounting the camera itself to the tripod, it's better to use a foot like this. And this stabilizes the lens itself, so that the camera is just hanging loose. You can, have your finger here and your hand here, and the lens will still be a lot more stable on that tripod than it would if you had the camera itself. So yeah, this right here almost like eliminates that shakiness of the lens, because it's grabbing the lens itself. So that's why I highly recommend that if you have this lens, the 100 to RF 100 to 400, that you get this foot here. It was, for me, it was a game changing. My keeper rate went up. I'll say maybe I was getting 50 to 60%. Hitting now 75-80% of my shots that are just keepers. Not all of them are photos that I particularly like, but they are sharp. And that's what matters to me. That's what this is about. So this allowed me to get those sharp photos with minimizing that shakiness. So yeah. Long story short, can you begin with this camera to take photos as an amateur and progressively mature with it and take professional-like photos? Absolutely you can, but you're going to have to make some changes, and these are the changes that I have made here. Okay, now I am using my custom the custom settings button here. I have two particular settings that I use for this camera that I have saved, and I shoot, of course, manual, but I've saved those settings to the camera. So remember that with the 100 to 400, when you're wide open, your aperture will be at 5.6. Okay, so that's when you're zoomed out at 5.6. When you start zooming in, all the way up to 400 millimeters, you're going to reach f8, which can get pretty dark, depending on your situation outside. But adding the fact that this is a crop sensor camera, that also doesn't help very much. So you will get some noise, or a lot of noise, if you don't set this camera properly. The way to set it up, and this goes back to this, having a tripod and using this thing here, and a tripod in combination with a tripod, it's because of the following reason. These are my settings, okay, with this camera, with this lens. Now if you notice, I'm at 1/250 for my shutter speed, and obviously you have my the aperture and exposure compensation. So I am shooting at a very slow shutter speed of 250. This can cause issues with blurry shots if your subject is moving too fast, or if you're trying to do this manually. You will get a lot of blurry shots, even though the lens is image stabilized. But with this lens, low shutter speeds are a necessity, because there is no other way that you can make your photos, that you can allow more light into the sensor without lowering your shutter speed. There's just no other way. That f8, once you're at 400 millimeters, is not going anywhere. You're stuck there. I mean, you can crank it up if you want to make your images sharper, if you think that might help. But in my experience, f8 has been pretty sharp in general. I generally don't need to mess with cranking it up more. And with the crop sensor camera, you probably want to be at the widest open that you can for your aperture. So the way I found that works with this camera in combination with this lens is to lower my shutter speed. I keep it around 200 to 250 on a tripod. If I'm hand holding, I drop the shutter speed to 400 and I don't move it from there. That's just how it is. Now I'm gonna show you some photos that I have taken with this camera to 250 on a tripod with this mount, and you will. I do not use Adobe Lightroom or anything that expensive. I actually use Canon's DPP. Excuse me. Because I'm not making money out of these photos. This is just a hobby of mine, and I love it very much. It helps me psychologically, being out there in nature and, you know, just having something to do. It's just that happiness that brings me just to be able to capture a nice shot of a bird. And I think that if you're a photographer, you yourself can understand what I'm talking about. When it comes to nature photography, it's very satisfying. And yeah, I will share some photos with you guys to show you what you can do with this camera. And these photos were taken on a nice sunny day. Some of them were taken in the shade, and at that point I had to drop my shutter speed to about 160 to 200. Okay, 1/200 or 1/160 or 1/200 on a tripod with this foot. Okay, and I'll show those share those photos with you guys right now. That was basically it, just sharing with you how important a foot, if you have this camera, tripod foot with the Arcus Swiss, or just being able to mount it on the lens itself, not the camera, how much better your photos can look because of that stability that you give the camera and the lens to be able to get those sharp shots with lower shutter speeds and lower lighting conditions. So yes, you can take beautiful photos with this little entry level camera and lens combination. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share with you guys. And also, I would not, the R10, I would not pair this camera with anything above this 100mm to 400mm lens. I have tried the Sigma 150 to 600C contemporary, and also the Canon RF 800mm f11. With this camera, it's a disaster. The depth of field, because of the depth of field and the lack of contrast of crop sensor cameras when it comes to, you know, birds and things like that, makes it a horrible combination. It's a disaster. Your keeper rate will be a lot lower, and if you look around on the internet, you will find a lot of bird photographers talk about the R7 and how it has that the issue with locking onto the birds. It wants to pulsate like this, you know, do that. And that's Canon's response to that has been that because of the nature of crop sensor camera, that lack of contrast, where the camera, the autofocus cannot discern or cannot tell where the eye and the rest of the body of the bird, you know, ends. Or for example, if you're shooting a picture of a crow, black crow, this camera, the crop sensor cameras, struggle with telling where the eye is and the rest of the body. So it's looking for where to lock. So you find that those issues. Also, because it lets in less light, it also has issues with contrast and locking onto your subject's eye. The only thing you can do really with this here, you could use denoising AI software out there to clean up your images. But if you don't want to deal with that, if you're not doing this for pay, like for, you know, for a living, drop your shutter speeds, stabilize your lens, and you'll see the results. So, and I think I will leave the video here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.